Before we get into our next panel, which is actually a debate, and that's why we have lined up the chairs as far away from each other as possible, because things do get a bit abrupt and violent sometimes. There is a general agreement that CSR, corporate social responsibility, has the potential to play an extremely significant role in India's development story. The potential of annual CSR funds range from anywhere between 18,000 to 20,000 crores in Indian rupees. According to a recent KPMG report, the actual CSR spend for top 100 listed companies in India as on 31st March 2016 was a little over 6,500 crores in Indian rupees. While that may look like a big number in its absolute sense, let's take a look at its relative value. With an average grants allocation of about 50 lakhs INR per organization, we can assume that about 13,000 NGO partners may have acquired a small program grant for just 1 year. And I'm sure if you discount the repeat grants as well as the size of the grants, the actual number would probably be half of that. Let's take a look on the NGO side. With over 3.3 million NGOs in India, if we assume that even 1% of them have impactful and scalable operations, we're looking at about 33,000 potential partners. We managed to get 150 of those in the room today. Is corporate social responsibility limited to contribution of funds? What happens when 2/3 of the companies that are required to spend on CSR default? What are the penal provisions? With great power comes great responsibility, said Uncle Ben to Peter Parker right before he got shot. Is the inverse true? Does great power come with a legally mandated corporate social responsibility? Let's hear from our panelists as well as our very own Uncle Ben, my colleague Krishnan Hariharan.
Thank you, everyone. Firstly, I know this is the panel right after lunch. So as you can see today, we're trying to not do presentations. We're trying to keep it active. And that's why we thought, why not start with a debate? And a debate on CSR at the Bombay Stock Exchange. I don't think there's a better venue for you to decide if this is something that is going to be one of the solutions for developing India or not. But hopefully, we have an esteemed group of panelists here. What I normally like to do is trick the panelists by putting them on the other side of what they normally want to talk about, but we're going to be nice today and let them actually hold the positions. The way this is going to play out is we're going to have 2 people on the for side and 2 against, before I get to what the question is going to be around, which I think you have a rough idea and a rough sense here. Once they've done the initial, then there will be rebuttals, and towards the end, we're going to open it up to the floor to get your opinions on the question and the topic that this panel session is about. I think Anurag's already covered quite a few things about CSR in terms of numbers, the potential, but I think this rich panel here will really be able to speak about whether this is a viable solution or not. Very quickly, in most cases, we either say something is very necessary and needed, or we say it's not. But to really get to the heart of it, that question is, even a valid question is, have these experts talk about it to you. Before I call them on stage, we're going to ask you guys to vote, as we did earlier in the day. I'm going to put the question up here, and if you can now, please do vote for this. We're not going to show you the results. What we're going to do is wait till the debate gets over, ask you the question again, see if anybody got convinced to change their sides. You got to love the music. All right, thank you. And with that, I'd like to first introduce the 2 people who are going to be speaking for the motion. And first, I'd like to introduce Hisham Mundal. He leads work at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation and has been working very closely with the Dasra adolescent team on their programs that we've been hearing about today. I won't go into too much of the work. I had the privilege and pleasure of working with Hisham many, many moons ago with the Gates Foundation on the HIV program. Hisham Mundal. The second person speaking for the motion is Gaurav Gupta. Gaurav is Dahlberg's Regional Director for Asia and also leads the firm's energy practice. He will be able to shed quite a bit of light on this topic. And again, I'm going to encourage all my panelists to be really, really energetic. Otherwise, I'm going to be the one having to do it. So be as active as you can. You don't have to sit when you talk, all of that. Now, the real interesting part of this, the people who are against the motion in the Bombay Stock Exchange and taking that position in front of all of you. The first is Anshu Gupta. I don't really need to do much of an introduction. He founded Goonj, an amazing organization, and it's a mission to take clothing a matter of concern for all and highlight it with the subject. So he's the first person speaking against the motion. And second person speaking against the motion is Aparna Piramal. She's a thought leader on business and design workplaces. She's contributed to the UK's Financial Times. And we genuinely are very, very happy she's able to be here today because she's fighting a viral. And as Dasra is, Neera still insisted she come here. Now, I don't need to do much more talking. The last time we tried this, it went spectacularly well because everyone just kept arguing. So I'm going to actually give the against side the first opportunity. Like I said, one person from that side will speak, one person from the other side. Repeat the process, then they get 2 minutes to huddle, and then the fun begins with rebuttals. So, with the against side.
Oh, I thought first will be the pro type, no? So, you know, I have a lot of friends in technology, and many of them obviously think that technology is the only solution. So I often tell them कि भाई roti.com बनाने से रोटी नहीं मिलती. You know, I think that is where we have come after 3 years of this CSR thing. और मैं अभी देवल से मजे ले रहा था, मैं कह रहा था यार जो लोग एक दो लोग हमें सपोर्ट कर भी देते थे CSR के, आज के बाद वो भी नहीं करेंगे. You know, because simple. So last year what we heard is 17,000 crore rupees as CSR. Absolutely fantastic. There is I think the intention has been good for sure, and it is also a legal chance to do something good legally and in a big way. And I often wonder that Goonj must be coming in first 100, 200, 500 voluntary organizations in the country. Goonj gets 2 crore rupees or 1 crore rupees out of 17,000 crore rupees. So my very basic, very realistic question is that, is it going in the right direction? Is this, if Goonj sitting in such big cities with so much of whatever name, portfolio, whatever good points you want to stick to, if it has and it doesn't get that, what about the remaining hardcore people who are working in the grassroots areas for the so-called non-issues which matter more than the issues in this country? So is the direction correct? And if the direction is not correct, if we don't understand the issues better, then there is no point in doing this. It's absolutely simple. Some of the facts which we also need to understand, that the problems are not in Gurgaon or Gachibowli. The problems are in Giridih. The problems are in Gadchiroli. Who is going there? And if the money is not going in that direction, what is the use of this entire game? So much of regulations. And I think, to be honest, CSR ultimately has become a much larger conference subject these days in the last couple of years than the practical subject. Every second day, someone is organizing a conference and talking about it. But my question is that what is happening in the field? Who will decide the issues? When the time will come that people like us actually throw away our lenses and accept absolutely, honestly, that for the last 30, 40, 50 years, with all kind of good intentions and resources, we are working, but nothing has changed. Anyone who is sitting here, if you can guarantee that the poverty is reduced, migration is reduced, water problem is reduced, anything which should reduce is reduced. I think that it was a moment for all of us in the development space, to be honest, to just keep ourselves away from the real work for some time, be absolutely silent, look into ourselves and see what is not working. Because the fact remains that the arrogance of people like us, the English speaking, the good school, good education, it is not solving any problem. We are going through that phase, and I think that's where I'm questioning the entire CSR agenda, that you as a foundation, as an organization, as a corporate organization, you are trying to build up your own capacities. You have 50 people, you have 100 people. That's not your mandate. If you want to hire taxis for your organization, of your corporate, you hire a service. You hire someone who has expertise in taxi. If you want to provide food to your employees, you hire someone who has expertise in providing food. If you want to do something good, look for the people who have the expertise, who have the mandate, who have the heart at the right place. Don't get into that space because that space is not meant for you. You don't know anything about it. Let's understand. It is similarly, yesterday I was giving this example. If I get into the marketing part of any good company or product, I'll mess up. Because that's not where my heart and soul is there.
Thank you. I think that was a good start to it. So now either Hisham or Gaurav, is CSR actually doing anything?
Thanks. First of all, I want to say that Gunj is an extraordinary example of civic leadership, and all of us should be contributing to it, corporates, individuals, with money and with support. The question is, does CSR matter? And my argument is CSR not just matters, but it has to be absolutely central to the story of development. Let me start with the first bit, the C bit, not so much the S and the R. What do corporates have? Beyond the money, what they have is capabilities. They have a set of skills, which is where I disagree with what you say. They have a set of skills which are unparalleled. For example, who knows more about hand wash? UNICEF or Unilever? Who knows more about financial inclusion, the World Bank or Paytm? Who knows more about understanding the aspirations of adolescents? Bill Gates or Karan Johar? And no disrespect to all of them, but I'm here to win a debate. And I say this because that is what we need to be leaning on in terms of what corporates can do. This isn't just about them going and, setting up their own NGO and attempting to replicate it, but the core skills that they have, which have made them as big and as profitable and successful as they are, need to be deployed in this. The second is what they have is funding which can be more agile, which can take more risks, which can work on truly the tougher issues. Now, to be fair, we haven't seen enough of that in India, but in the US, the H-1B immigration debate that's happening is being led by the tech companies. They're putting their necks out there. In India, the Tatas and what they're showing is a phenomenal example to other organizations. The third thing that we need to be looking at of why CSR is important is just the question of momentum. Issues are not solved by one person doing a number of things. You need lots of people to weigh in. And the more you have corporates engaged in development issues, the more there is a perception that you're inexorably moving towards progress. So for example, Swachh Bharat will succeed only when you see 25 corporates lining up and pushing just as much as the government is trying to push or individual NGOs are going to push. I'll conclude with one point. One is, as development sector professionals, not only should we be tolerant, but we should proactively go out and welcome corporate involvement. For corporates, think of CSR as core to your business. Do not deploy the B team. There should be an A team effort. Think of it as business development for your consumers or your workforce, and hopefully you'll be a much happier man the next time we meet.
Okay. Aparna?
Yeah. Thank you, Hisham, for your comments. Just to get back to respond to this idea of saying that who is a better person, is it UNICEF or Unilever? I don't think in theory, I think this is a question of, in theory there's no dispute, of course. It's a question of what actually happens. So I'd like to share just 3 examples from my own experience, and I'm talking here as someone who's been either coerced or inspired by Neera and Deval to also move from the corporate sector and spend more time in the nonprofit world. But there are 3 examples. So first is there's a person called Robin Chaurasia of Kranti, who some of you might have heard of. She works with daughters of sex workers, and she rehabilitates them in the most kind of amazing way possible by giving them a shelter home, but it's such an amazing way that every 1 year she needs to relocate because the landlords won't accept this kind of setup in their building. Now, would Robin ever get CSR funding? Number one, okay? Number two, I'm sitting on the board of a company which is a publicly listed, very well-run company. I'm an independent board director. And I'm literally sitting as I listen to these CSR conversations, and the only message is, how can we do this without getting anyone into trouble? You know the line, no one ever got fired for buying IBM? The decision on CSR is not as strategic as we think it out to be. It's often a decision saying, we need to deploy a certain amount of money. Who can we give it to so that it won't be controversial in any way for the company? And finally, I'm associated with a nonprofit called the Indian Police Foundation, which is very much a startup, full of great intent, a lot of ideas, fantastic board. But now, obviously, until we get to a certain stage, the CSR rules won't help. So to answer the question is, will CSR help? The question is, in what way? How? How do we envisage these partnerships? And in three things, I think, that matter to corporates a lot, whether it's intent, whether it's practice, or whether it's risk. All of these things, I don't think, have been spelt out. And you ask the individual company to think about all these things, you know, what intent is there in terms of responsibility? Is there a practice of really collaborating? What risks, how are we going to really look at risk? What is our attitude towards risk? I don't think it's sufficient right now to actually make, to say that we're going to, you know, shift the needle and kind of deliver the redemption that all of us would really like in this room.
Thank you very much. And the last, Gaurav.
Hi. Well, those are hard acts to follow. Look, I think one thing I would say is that we keep talking about this number, 12,000 crores, 18,000 crores, and so forth. And what we don't talk about is quality, right? So every form of capital that's going out there has a quality attached to it. It costs less than $100 to start the microfinance industry. So a lot of it is about, it's not about the amount of money, but the quality attached. And that's actually what the government had in mind when they even thought about the current CSR bill. It wasn't actually about creating more money. There's actually tons of money in government funds that are not being deployed. The challenge was they did not have governance, they did not have sufficient governance to deploy those funds. They did not trust themselves to put that money out there and know what it was going towards. And the idea was that you have corporates with very professional standards putting out capital for social causes where they already have the systems in place to say, okay, where is this money going? Let's report on it. That was number one. So that was to do with governance. The second was capability, as my colleague just mentioned, which is that this money comes with leverage. It's not 12,000 crores just given out. It's 12,000 crores given out by companies that have very different capabilities. So you give money and you give expertise. That expertise has incredible value. So this is the second reason why CSR can be actually very catalytic. The third thing that we don't talk enough about is scaling solution providers. I think everyone is very interested in scaling solutions. But look at the conversations that are going on in corporates today. And we have many of them as clients who come to us to talk about, okay, we're deploying 10 crores right up to 200-300 crores. How should we do this in a smart way? All of those conversations end up also being about how do we excite our colleagues, the people that we hire. All of them are now involved in a conversation that says, okay, my company is trying to think about where to deploy this money. How can I leverage my innovations, ideas that I have? Suddenly a much larger part of India is getting engaged in a conversation, and a very capable part of India is getting engaged in a conversation that they were not engaged with. I think that really can move the needle, because suddenly you have someone who is working on some sort of technology which previously for them was all about selling more soap or how to keep a product on the shelf for longer, and recognizing that that technology can actually transform the nutrition that kids are getting in their midday meal program. And those things are actually happening today. Corporates are having those conversations and recognizing that an individual or an entrepreneur is seeing a technology, seeing that funds are available for CSR, seeing that that conversation is happening, and there's maybe not a huge amount, but still some more interest amongst the top level in a company to say, let's take this a bit more seriously. That will have dramatic effects. We're able to start to use that talent, which today is not working on the most interesting problems. You know, the kind of stuff that CSR works on is some of the most challenging problems. So how do you get a lot of that corporate talent involved? I think that's the other thing. So not just scaling solutions, which is where most people's minds go to when they think about 12,000 crores. It's about how do you use that to scale solution providers? I think that's where the big bang is.
Okay. Normally we'll give you about a minute if you want to confer, but if you guys want to start the debate, you can. In terms of where the debate's going to go, we're going to let them figure it out. But in general, I think the questions that are being raised here is, can you retrofit in the DNA of a corporate to really think with heart? Are you sending the right people? Is actually anything happening on the ground? And is intent enough? And I think that's very important that they're going to be now being able to rebut. So if the against side is ready, please go ahead.
Yeah. I think it is all based on absolutely wrong assumptions. Simple. You know, I think
Now the gloves are off. Good.
if we think that we can really build up capabilities of the voluntary sector and all, it is again absolutely utter arrogance, because the fact remains that that means we are not ready to learn from Pradhan, from Seva, from CRY, so many institutions who have done such wonderful job pan-India at absolutely no money with them in the toughest possible geographies, and top of all, very ethically. That's the most important part. If you talk about, you know, scale, capabilities and all, I think when CSR happens, it is extremely important for the new players to learn from the old players. Then coming with the same arrogance that we have done such wonderful job in the corporate, so we can actually do the same thing in the voluntary space also. You cannot, because if it was possible for you as individuals, as group of people, even when the act was not there, you would have done. And a much bigger thing, because why did the act come ultimately? Because there was something which was not happening. Because the money was available, but it was not happening somewhere. The other important part is that it's extremely important for all of us to understand the real issues. Large part of us are worried about drinking water at certain place, but how many of us are ready to put in money, you know, for the agriculture water? Because that's where the migration is happening. That's where the farmer societies are happening. A whole lot of us want to work on education and health, all those typical issues where the world was already working. Why are we not going to the deeper pockets? Why are we not investing our money in the village part of it? So these are very relevant questions in the initial phase of CSR. You know, this is still very initial, and it has all the chances of corrections right now. But if it keeps happening at the same format, in the same way, I don't think that it is going to solve any big problem. It's very simple, because it's very important to see the problem through the lenses of people for whom we are working, instead of using our corrupt lenses again and again.
Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, sure.
Well, I mean, I think the answer that you're seeking is in what you've said, which is we're at a very early stage. I mean, it would be the same thing as saying many of the NGOs 50 years ago, the models that they were adopting, were they going to catalyze India? And the answer would be no, right? So I think there is a learning exercise. But I think there's also maybe some misinformation around what is it that corporates do when they engage on CSR. They're not trying to become NGOs themselves. In fact, many of them would love to work with Seva, and it's not just about learning. It is actually that the CSR side of corporates is not generally trying to execute. It's actually just trying to figure out, how do I give my money into something that gives me a reasonably good return, sometimes that return being more strategic. I mean, one of the things that we've seen, 3-4 years ago, people would ask us, I think a point that both of you raised, okay, how do I give my money and avoid some risk because I have to give some money? 1 or 2 years later, they started asking the question, how do I give some money and be able to show some good returns? Maybe put that in an annual report. Every conversation we have now is simply about, okay, how does CSR fit with my strategy? Which makes it very sustainable. And you know, I remember a great example of an organization that wanted to market itself as a forward-leaning innovation FMCG. And one of the pieces of work we did with them is to identify the most innovative educational organizations in the country. And what ended up happening is their CSR arm stopped giving money and their marketing arm started to give even more money. It dwarfed the amount of money that those NGOs were receiving from CSR because they could see a connect. They could see that if they could talk about the impact they're having here, there was some marketing upside as well, which is precisely where I think you were describing we'd like to see CSR go to be more sustainable and strategic. But it's getting there. I mean, it's only been 3-4 years of the act. Imagine what NGOs were like in their first 3 years.
I think you talk about being sustainable and strategic, but I'd like to just push back. And I think whenever I've seen companies that are really looking to do something different in terms of their CSR, and there is data around this also, that it's just linked to people over there who want to drive that particular agenda. And, you know, and I think that often for a corporate to actually play this role, like it might define itself quite narrowly. But you know, there's data, for example, that says that out of all the companies that are eligible for CSR, about 1/4 do not actually comply to the norms, and they deliver far less. Of course, 1/3 also over-deliver. But in my experience, whenever I've seen business leaders really interested in this, for them, it's actually a personal goal that's come out of their own learning. And I just don't know if the whole idea of, you're saying corporates don't want to be philanthropists, I agree, but I just don't know if they're cut out to be that way, you know? And when we say, can CSR matter? Of course it can, but is it the only thing that matters? Is it the thing that's actually gonna make us all, you know, get a smile on our face in this room? Or are we just all looking at this utopia of these numbers and saying that we're going to be, you know, just hoping that some of this falls by our way? And of course, the thing that we haven't looked at is, does CSR matter? Is, you know, for all the damage that corporates cause, you know, is the CSR number sufficient to cover up all the kind of flaws in the first place? But that's a different issue.
Sure. So CSR is not your one-stop cleansing of, you know, generations of sin. So that's not what it's meant to be. It's not what it is. On the point about it being dependent on a few employees, I actually don't see that. Look at Google, all right? And look at I don't know how many of you folks out here have had exposure to Google and the work that they're doing individually with NGOs, but they're increasingly doing a lot of it. And it is built on the back of 1 or 2 employees, but now you've got so many Google employees working on this in their 1 day a week that they can work on stuff. And what they're doing is phenomenal amount of taking long-established existing NGOs who've been doing extraordinary work, but arming them with data analytics and data visualization, which makes them a hell of a lot more effective than they always were. For every look at the statistics that are there, and you say the numbers might be high or low or growing or not growing, etc., take Jamshedpur. Why is Jamshedpur the way it is? Because many years ago, the Tatas took a call that they were going to invest in the community. Now, you can argue that they were good people, but you can also argue that they were astute businessmen. They needed their community to be healthy, because from that healthy community, you get a more educated and more productive and more loyal workforce. Nothing wrong with that. It isn't just about the amount of money that a company is going to give. Krishna in the beginning said, can we infuse heart into an organization? You cannot infuse heart into an organization. If there is an organization that's evil, it was evil, it will remain evil. But what you can do is infuse brains, right? If I have, as an organization, if I suddenly start looking at renewables, do I want cleaner air? Of course I do. Do I care about the environment? Of course I do. But what I'm buying into is latching on to the government's efforts of reducing the cost of renewables and solar panels to make myself more profitable. Nothing wrong with that.
But how many Jamshedpurs do we have? No, how many Jamshedpur? I mean, there are so many corporate, there are so many institutions, so all across. But how many those epitome of success, as we say, we
Not
have?
enough, and we
And
need
why
more.
do we need CSR Act for Google employees or someone to operate? I mean, even without Act, it will work. And my larger question today, which unfortunately is happening, that why does the Swachhta mission need CSR money to operate? As individuals, we are paying enough taxes. There is cess which increases every year. Why are we taking those shortcuts? You know, why are we again putting money where already some resources are there and resources are mismanaged for last so many years by the bigger agencies. Why are we not focusing on the real issues if we really want to do something good when the act is there and act is pretty good that way. If you read the act, I mean, it gives you enough freedom to operate the way you want to operate. People have done the interpretation on the basis of their own choices. Ki bhai, no, it is mandated that we want to do it in the next half a kilometer or 10 kilometers of this thing, but the CSR Act does not say that.
Yeah, we'll have one more rebuttal, and then I will open it to like 5 minutes of questions before they will close out, and then we'll ask you the poll again.
Yeah, I think firstly, this is beyond the CSR Act. I'm certainly not here to defend the Act. And I think the issue is, when we talk about why does Swachh Bharat need CSR money, for example, I agree with you. It may not need CSR money. But firstly, the idea here is not that CSR and CSR money is the solution. I don't think anyone would get up here and say that. I think we're saying, is it one of the things that can catalyze change? Does it have a serious capability to deliver a lot of change? And to that, I think the answer is yes. And we have to differentiate between different forms of capital. There's government capital, which is 100 times more, but it has huge problems. It comes with political strings attached. And that is why nowhere, not in India, but in no country, is it deployed efficiently. Corporate capital that is of an investment form, which is trying to return money to people, has high levels of efficiency but does not care about social issues. CSR money sits somewhere in between. It is governed by corporates. It has a lot of that capability and structures in place, but it does not have the same return on investment issues which actually stop corporates from taking care of a lot of social issues. So all of these forms of capital have a place. And I would say that CSR is a great way to think about innovation. It's a great way to move forward quickly on things in the social space where otherwise it takes government 2-3 years. But it doesn't mean that you don't need government capital. It doesn't mean that you don't need private capital. But it has a very important catalytic role because it can move much faster than government capital can.
I think we need to be clear, anything goes in the government kitty can only be governed by the government. Your corporate governance or NGO governance will not work there. We all know that. So let's not fool ourselves.
Just really quick. Well, we forgot like the other major part of capital, which is family capital. And it's easy enough to talk about Google, but really India, in terms of its corporate landscape, consists of a lot of family-run companies, some very large, and of course the public sector. But really, if you're looking for a form of capital that can be more agile, that is prepared to be more innovative, is looking at things that are more sustainable. In India, there's always been that tradition of family philanthropy, which is of course much more magnified now. And I think maybe that would have been the better title of this debate, is family versus CSR.
Okay, I will open it up for some questions or even comments. If any of you have a position to take, you can. I think we've been hearing different sides, but at a core level, the question is, what is really happening? Is this all just talk at this moment? And is the right resources going from the right places? But I'm sure the topics go beyond that, so I will open it up. We'll start from here. One more back there, the mic. And on that side, 2 as well, please. 1.
Hi, I'm Nishit Kumar from the Center for Social and Behavior Change Communication. I worked for 11 years with Childline, and Childline is the world's largest child protection service, which is funded primarily by the government. And during the course, and all of us in the sector who work with the government have faced this at one point or the other. And the fact is this, the government has consistently tried and has now effectively reduced social sector spending. At Childline, for scale, when we wanted to cover every district of the country, the government didn't have the funds, and we were told to go to CSR. When we went to corporates, the largest corporates in the country, they told us, sorry, child protection is not in the list of approved items for CSR. Please, thank you so much.
I think we'll take, there's someone back there, then we'll move to this side. There were 2 people here as well.
Hello, Mohammed Mersi from the Synergos Institute in the US. So I have 3 observations. Firstly, I think that CSR is, when it comes to Europe, is usually confined to a very glossy chapter with beautiful graphics in the annual report of the company. I think CSR will only work if three things work. First of all, CSR has to be linked to ISR, which is individual social responsibility, and the two have to go in tandem. Secondly, CSR works only when the company has been able to properly identify what's its purpose and then align with its purpose. And then thirdly, CSR will only work if it is part of a larger ecosystem in which other players are also motivated to do the same. And finally, executive pay has to change so that its focus is not only on shareholder value creation, but also on delivering social responsibility.
Thank you. We'll take questions from there. And one more thing, it's okay for someone to say CSR doesn't work. Huh? We're not being videotaped by the BSE here, so just take a position if you want to, because it's more fun that way.
Hi, I'm Meenakshi from Prava and Community Need, the Youth Collective. It's a comment and a question for people who are for the question that is posed. I think the whole conversation or the whole definition about corporate social responsibility, is it just limited to funding कर दो यार, है ना? पाप कर लिया उसको गंगा में कैसे ना हूँ? It's like गंगा में डुबकी लगा के आ जाता हूँ. Do whatever, but then just fund and then get away with it. I've had some experiences where the CSR is just used as the marketing gimmick, but also can we just go beyond the money aspect of it? And so say for example, a corporate just giving access to water in a village, but उसी गांव के पानी को वो pollute भी कर रहे हैं. So can the CSR also look inward and see the ethical or the responsible practices within? And some other aspects, maybe, you know, kind of getting their employees to volunteer, to change the mindset within the organization. What are the corporates actually also doing to just improve the happiness index within the organization? It's all the larger gamut of social responsibility beyond financial.
You want a quick response to that? And then we'll take one more last question. Then I'll ask you guys to quickly close out because I want to do the poll.
Sure. There was a letter that came out a few months ago by the head of BlackRock. It's the biggest investment bank in the world, some gazillions of dollars or trillions. And one of the things that he said was that all the companies that they invest in, it was a letter to the CEOs, had to start looking at social responsibility, because if you did not do that now, it represented a fundamental risk to your organization, and therefore BlackRock would stop investing. Any corporate that, you know, puts in a borehole so you can get water out and is separately polluting the water is daft and will pay a price. So short answer, yes. Longer answer, there is slow but steady progress towards people understanding that. As a corporate, should I or should I not use child labor? I could turn around and say, I don't know. But I can also look at it and say, if I'm able to put a child labor-free brand on my product, can you imagine the increased pricing that I'd be able to charge? Can you imagine the increased business I'd be able to get? So doing good and doing better.
Yeah, okay. I think the one thing I would add just on that is I think a few of the comments are all about execution. Yes, there is very bad CSR execution, and yes, there's very good CSR execution. Yes, 1/3 of CSR is non-compliant. How many NGOs are non-compliant? Does that mean that the NGOs are not important as catalysts? It's more than 1/3. So, you know, a lot of the stuff that we think about for CSR is about how certain people are executing, and the conversation there just needs to shift to, okay, how do we help them execute better? But it doesn't take away from the power that corporates bring with their money in actually making some big change happen.
All right, one last question from this side, and then we'll ask the panelists to close out.
I'm Poonam Mutreja from PFI. You know, I wish we didn't have to have made this rule or this law of CSR, and it was a more voluntary. I want to put out 3 Vs. It was a more voluntary effort, and we have great examples of philanthropy in India, and I'd like to mention the Tata Trust. If you look at the rights-based movement, which is very important for Indian democracy, always and now even more, or if you look at the work on corruption, scholarships, investment in individuals, there is a lot for us to have learned from the Tata Trust, and there are some perhaps who've learned, but not enough. So there has to be one is voluntary, Second, values, a value which many of you talked about, whether you're for the motion or against the motion, in terms of, you know, a commitment to change, not just for your own profit maximization, that a healthy state or a healthy district will have better outcomes for a company's profits and for a country's economy, etc. But finally, the one that I really want to focus on is vision. You know, the quantum of money does not matter. It is the vision you bring to the table. And also, every proposal, I believe, is a document of vision. And unless it is that, both from the side of the NGO and vision from the donor, you raised this question about, does Karan Johar know more about working with young people or Bill Gates? I'd like to add the third. I think the people who've really helped us understand about young people, their aspirations, their needs, is the youth survey, which was done by IIPS and Population Council. It's told us much more than any of these people. So where do you glean the light? You don't lean on one pole. So the research, the global evidence, the national evidence, and I believe corporates and donors have the opportunity as well as the luxury to spend time. Their staff are well paid, well qualified, to glean all of this and bring the vision along with the NGO. And it has to be a collective effort. It's not either or. And the heart, without the heart, absolutely not.
Okay. Sorry to have to cut it off. 1 minute for one person from each team you can pick. And then you just have to answer 2 poll questions. Let's see what this debate did to our thinking. You can start with the foresight, since we started there. You can just close out. One last statement for the motion or against.
Okay. So, you know, I believe India is a very beautiful country. So I'll give you one very simple example that none of us actually sitting here know how much fine will happen if I don't wear a helmet or a seat belt. But all of us know the power of 100 rupees. And then we say traffic police chor hai. Because what we do, we don't understand that the actual fine was 500 rupees, and by giving 100 rupees, we actually saved 400 rupees, so we are 4 times corrupt. 4 guna bade chor hai hum. Now, why I give this example that it is extremely important what Meenakshi raised here. The 2% is important, but there has to be a correction in the remaining 98% also. Because half the problems which we all are trying to solve will not even happen if we put in that money itself within our systems to do something good. Second most important part, for a lot of institutions, I think it is important that they only and only give money if they have to do CSR, and they do not get into advising and building up systems and all, because many of the institutions with whom you're trying to work maybe don't need that kind of expertise, they need different kind of expertise.
Thank you very much. You get a minute?
Sure. I'll come back to what it is that corporates can bring to the table. Unilever has access to 1 million retail outlets. Okay, Airtel and Vodafone and all of those guys sell mobile phones at 500, 600, 700,000 outlets. Imagine the kind of reach if we're able to get the products that we are wanting to sell, or the services or the communications through them. Don't get bitter about CSR because you had a funding proposal that didn't go through. This is much bigger than that. And this is not an assessment of the CSR Act. That's a different debate entirely, and you know, I might not be on the foresight on a CSR Act. Just think about what it is that we can get corporates to do to assist people like Gunj.
All right, thank you. I'm going to have you sit on the stage. Like I said, can you just pop the 2 questions we have? That's the first one. This is a more fun one, so. You have to stay on stage for this part. Now the second question, and while you're answering it, a big round of applause for everyone here. Where's the second question? Do we have the second question? Once the debate is done, now we'll give you both what you guys agreed on before and after, and this is the question for you guys now. All right, here we go.
I can live with that.
All right. Thank you very much again to the great panel here and for everyone.
Yeah, can we have the original results for the questionnaire that was for the sample questions that were shared at the beginning of the debate? Yes. Okay, an astounding yes. Was there a second question? That's about it. Okay, got it. Sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you, speakers, panelists, our Uncle Ben, for stirring things up. I must agree with one thing. CSR is, legally mandated CSR in India is relatively nascent. It's been only about 3 years, 3.5 years to be precise. Let's give it more time. Let's see how things go before we can actually pull this topic again for another debate a few years down the line.